Hello, guys. This is the next level. I'm going to talk about the Pitt game last week. Three things to take away from the Pitt game. I'm going to preview the Duke game coming up this Saturday, and I have to address the top 25 rankings that came out last night regarding college football playoffs because I was not pleased. I was not a fan. If you follow me on Twitter, you know where I'm about to come from on this. But we'll get to that in a second. First, three things to take away from the Duke game. One, UNC's for real. Coming into that game, UNC has been pretty much beating up competition where you can just roll the football out on the field, and UNC should win those games. Pitt was the first thing of competition where people were like, okay, we'll really see what Carolina's made of. Pitt plays really great defense. They were also 6-1 at the moment. They were playing at home. They had a lot of things going for them. So we were going to learn what Carolina was made of. And Carolina showed out up there. 20-3 at halftime and 26-19 in a game that really wasn't that close. But UNC was about its business when they went to Pittsburgh. And that showed me UNC's for real this season. Point two, defense gets all the praise. Defense once again put on a clinic, especially that first half. They held Pitt at bay. When it was time for Pitt to put up points, they were held to 3. Des Lawrence and the Rude Boys out there were breaking up all the passes. So even though our D-line did not get to Pitt's quarterback quick enough, he had nobody to throw to. They were pretty much all covered. So our defense just really put on a clinic. We got a couple turnovers. I mean, really, this defense is night and day over the defense we had last year. So they get all the praise. Point three, we have not seen our offense play at a high level yet. Like consistently at a high level. They've given us halves, they've given us quarters, they have not given us 60 minutes. So as good as we've been, we can be much better. We have not played our best game this season yet. And we'll see. Like, because that first half against Pitt was great. We connected on several of those passes down the field that Pitt's defense dares you to take. We connected on those. We made them pay. The second half, I don't know, we were conservative. Did we decide not to do those plays anymore? Did Pitt get the better of us? I don't know. Our offense can do better. We just need to put 60 minutes of effort out on the field. We haven't seen it yet, so we can play much better. But those are the three things to take away. Okay, let's talk about the Duke game real quick. The biggest storyline with the Duke game is going to be the UNC offense against Duke's defense. UNC's offense, I think, is third in the nation. They're definitely top 5. They had 7.7 yards per play. This Tar Heel team does not run a lot of plays. But they don't have to, because the plays they do run seem to get huge chunks of yards, and before you know it, we're in the end zone, or we got a field goal, and we're off the field. So that's pretty much what our offense is. On the flip side, Duke's defense, I don't know where it is now, but prior to that Miami game, and I'm not going to get into that ending, to be honest, neither team deserved to win. Like in soccer, if they draw, both teams get a point instead of one team getting 3 points. That's the way that game should have ended Saturday. Because Miami blew a 12-point lead, and Duke let Miami come in, and with no head coach, looking a mess, gave up 200 yards of penalties, and still were leading them by 12 points. So neither of them deserved to win. But back to the Duke defense. Duke defense prior to that game only allowed 3.6 yards per play. So that's top 5 metric too. I do realize that they allow 6 yards per play or something in that neighborhood against Miami. So that's not a good look for them. But we're going to learn a lot about our offense this week. Like, this is the biggest defense or the best defense we will play this season after Pitt. Or not after Pitt hasn't. Pitt was the best defense we played, and now Duke is. So we're going to see what our offense is made of. And here's a great opportunity for our offense to come out there and just really make a statement. The key to the defense this week is really going to be to keep Duke behind the chains. This Duke team is not like other Duke teams. Cutcliffe seems to be very predicated on offense usually with his Duke teams because his defense has not been as good. This year, he has a pretty solid defense. That and the quarterback he has playing now is not talented. He is not as talented as prior quarterbacks at Duke. So Cutcliffe decided to have his offense complement his defense. And the offense is going to be about ball control and running game, etc. Running game part is concerning because we do give up a run quite a bit. But if we can get Duke behind chains on their possessions, we have the best chance to get off the field. That's the key to the defense. Get Duke behind the chains. We want third and longs because Duke this year is not good at all on third and longs. So that's the key. Also, we need to watch out for Cirque has a running threat because Duke uses him as a running back quite a bit. So we want to look out for that. Finally, win special teams. Our special teams, I don't think they had the poorest showing in the world against Pitt, but the biggest special teams play that happened was that block punt that could have turned that game on its head. Because at this point, I think we're up 20-3, just a little bit past halftime. We are forced to punt. All of a sudden, we get Pitt this phenomenal field position. And luckily, our defense got on the field and made them kick a field goal. But our special teams are going to do better than that. Touchbacks, making sure that Duke and future opponents don't start with great field position at their kickoffs. We got to go back to winning special teams. Those are the keys for the Duke game. And I talked about the Pitt game. Now, let's get into this top 25 thing. I was none too pleased with the poll I saw yesterday. And on several fronts. The first point being, where in the world was North Carolina on that poll? And I say this because at this point, Carolina's won 7 straight games. We lost to South Carolina in week 1. We've won 7 straight games. We are 7-1. And the argument, and I'm going to really go in on this. The prevailing argument seems to be is who you played and who you beaten and who you scheduled. And Carolina hasn't really played anybody up to this point. Blah 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 blah. But that formula was not consistent across the board because if that formula was consistent, Alabama is not a top 4 team. Who is Alabama beating? Their best win is against a Georgia team that we don't know what they're doing. Georgia is a mess. They just lost 27-3 against Florida. You don't know what you're getting for their quarterbacks, and they rely too much on their running backs. And then Alabama went to Texas A&M, which I don't know how good Texas A&M is. They blow them out at Texas A&M. So those are probably the 2 best wins Alabama has to its name. And the Ole Miss loss, I hear people saying, well, Alabama had 5 turnovers and they still had a chance to win. Heck, I was saying that. But I'm not going to sit here and act like that game should be used as a plus for Bama when I know that same game would be used as a minus against other teams. So I'm not happy about that. To this point, Alabama is not a top 4 team. Not when you go by who you played and who you beaten. And speaking of Texas A&M, who have they beaten? Or look at where Texas A&M is now. Texas A&M last week beat South Carolina by a touchdown at their house. The 2 weeks prior, they went to Ole Miss. They got blown out. Alabama came to their house, blew them out. And it almost seemed like the committee gave them 2 mulligans. They're like, oh, you play quality opponents. It doesn't matter. You scheduled well. You deserve this ranking. And that's a joke. What was Texas A&M? 19? I mean, seriously, I'm not sure they deserve that. Moving on down. Mississippi State at 20. Mississippi State might be the quietest top 25 team on that list. Because they have beaten nobody. The two teams they played that people care about, they lost. LSU came to their place, nearly beat them, but they were out 21-6, I think, at that point, at some point in that game. And then Mississippi State went to Texas A&M, and they lost that game. But as I said with A&M, the committee's like, well, you have these are quality losses, so, and we know you're good because you scheduled well, even though this is SEC scheduling. So we're gonna get you a top 25 spot. I mean, go to Mississippi State's schedule. Look at who they played. Look at who they beaten, and tell me they deserve top 25 praise. I mean, seriously. And the one that really gets me, there's one that just really burned me up. It was Northwestern at 21, and Northwestern. I don't think Northwestern's on anybody's top 25 radar. They are a 6-2 team, but up until last week when they went to a 3-5 Nebraska and nearly won that game, those prior 2 weeks they were shut out by Michigan 38-0, and then Iowa came to their house and just hammered them 40-10. Northwestern is a team that's trending down, 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 down. That stock is plummeting. But it just seems like, oh, they beat Stanford in week 1. That Stanford went over everything. I mean, that is a joke to me. Like, it seems like this committee, it looked like they did not even use their eyes. It looked like they just looked at resumes. Like, they just looked at pieces of paper. And the only team that got eye test bonus was Alabama. I mean, seriously. Like, they have lost their mind. You got to use your eyes. And do trends not matter? A team that looks great in week 1 and looks like trash last week is not necessarily a team you're going to want as a top 25 team. Because they did not look like a top 25 team Northwestern did for the past 3 weeks. I mean, seriously. I don't understand that. That just burned me up. That the inconsistency of the eye test. The fact that it really wasn't used for anybody except Alabama. And that's point number 1. Point number 2, SEC bias is real. The SEC bias is really real. When I saw 16, 17, and 18, those spots, I think it was Ole Miss, or maybe 17, 18, 19. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. I'm sitting here like, you got to be kidding me. Like, those teams have beaten, they play in the SEC, but if you look at who they've beaten, Ole Miss has an Alabama win to hang this hat on. Mississippi State and A&M, And they were put in there because they lost to quality Alabama, and they lost to these other quality SEC teams. And what happens is, because they're there, Alabama looks like twice or 3 times as good because they went to these places and won. So all this SEC stuff, all these 6-2 SEC teams, that was disgusting to me. And going back to UNC is the only Power 5 one-loss team that did not get into that poll. I don't like that. SEC bias is real, and I'm not the one touting that horn, but it's handed to me. And all these analysts on ESPN just absolutely slobbering over it. Like, Jesus, get it together. And does the committee realize the Big 12 exists? I mean, TCU's undefeated, Baylor's undefeated, Oklahoma State's undefeated, and they're all like, 6 and 7 and 14? Did they watch Big 12 games? I mean, the committee, they sit in a room in Dallas, Texas. That is Big 12 territory. I mean, the SEC is not the only conference worth anything in football. They got to get their heads together. And while I'm at it, I'm a little bit out on the consistency of the committee. Because let's flash back to last season. Remember, TCU was number 3 after they have beaten, I forget who they won. They beat that last game of their season. They were 3. when those final polls came out, they were out. They went from 3 to 6 like that. So I don't know what to expect because a team like Clemson, who has looked great, can be number one. But if Alabama beats LSU, do we make Alabama number one now? I mean, it's so up and down. And I can see another scenario this season where somebody will be sitting in the top four, looking like they've done their job, and at the last second, bam, you're gone. I'm a little bit out on that consistency. And I understand you don't want to be like a poll. I understand because it's not based on preseason expectations. But there seemed to be a little bit of preseason expectations in that poll. One. And two, it has to be consistent. People shouldn't be getting pulled in and pulled out, and the formula is not close to being consistent. So they got some work to do. Let's be honest, they got quite a bit of work to do. But that's all I got to say about this. This is Jonathan Atkinson signing off in the next level. Tar Heels are playing Duke at noon on ESPN2. Be sure to watch it. Defend our bell. Go Hills.